again, you're always looking to lower the barrier to entry. So if you have something like straight into Riverside, which is the platform we use, people can get confused and it actually can frustrate the experience for people. And as always, track the progress in your CRM, keep pushing people through so you know where you're at. You don't drop anything here.
This is the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners looking for cool online tools, apps, and strategies to make business easy online. My name is Nick Cree and I'm your host. Each episode features a guest expert demystifying the online universe, sharing inspirational ideas, and providing tested real-world strategies to help you get the most of what's available online to grow your business today. Don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you. Subscribe now and get some great content and ideas for you and your business today. All right. Well, that brings us to the time of the evening where we have a guest presenter talking about something to do with the online ecosystem. Tonight it is Joel de Trapani. He is a podcaster, among other things. He's also the CEO and founder of a business called Vigo, which is matching students and mentors together. Definitely go and check out the site if you want to find out a bit more about what he does and how he's actually making an impact in the world. He's got a couple of podcasts out there which are well worth listening to. And we'll drop those links to those podcasts into the chat at the end of the evening. But Joel here, he is a podcast. We're having a conversation about podcasting just before we came on. And his comment to me was, this one here is a lot harder than what he does. So because we've got a live show, not too many live shows out there, but what Joel's going to talk to you about is how to do it a whole lot easier than I do it right here and now, and how to really make an impact on your business with it. So without further ado, put your hands together. Let's welcome to the stage, Joel de Trapani.
Thanks, guys. Let's pull the screen up here. Can everyone see a screen? Can someone put a thumbs up? All right, we got some nods there, which is great. Look, Nick, thanks for having me. I love those tools. I expected to know all the tools because I feel pretty up to date with stuff, but there's a few in there I hadn't seen before. And I just went to that Limitless website straight away because I wanted to buy it, but it's showing you $199. It was showing me $399. So I don't know. I'm in their algorithm somewhere where they are not liking me.
Different IP address. They know they've got more money than me.
Yeah, I need to find that IP address. But yeah, look, thank you guys for coming along. I love podcasting. I speak so regularly and aggressively about podcasting that I feel like it should be my whole job is to just kind of like advocate for podcasts. So I'm excited to share this with all of you guys. I'm particularly excited for two reasons. One is, if I heard correctly, I think Rob Roytel is on vacation, and I don't know why you came to this while you're on vacation. That's wild. So I hope this is worth part of your vacation, mate. I certainly wouldn't be logging into this. And then, kind of across the board, it sounded like there was quite a few coaches and executive coaches and kind of business advisors here. I actually feel like that is the most powerful ROI spot for podcasting. So if you have an executive coaching business, I think you could probably significantly increase your business or radically change the way you actually go about winning clients by using the podcasting. So I'm excited to kind of get your feedback on this. I think about this regularly about using podcasting in that little niche there. So I guess also I'm super happy to be interrupted. If you've got a question or you vehemently disagree, just jump on in. I'm completely down for that. I'm completely down for the discourse. And I just would love to keep this as conversational as possible. But yeah, feel free to jump in. So a little bit about who I am. Nick gave a bit of a pretty good wrap up there. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of a company called Vigo. That's an edtech SaaS company. We work with universities all through Australia and the UK. Been running that for years and have a team all around the world. I love doing that. We use podcasts a lot in that business. They're an extremely effective sales tool. On top of that, I have my own podcast called Do As I Say. That's a super fun business advice show where I get, super fun guests on, Shark Tank sharks, best-selling authors, unicorn founders and stuff like that. And we just run through real business troubles that people are having from Reddit. So I go to Reddit, I found real kind of like insane posts and we just kind of talk through them, which I love. I was the host of a podcast called The Unicorn Launcher, which topped the business charts in Australia. And I'm also a coach and advisor. and also a recent dad. So I feel like I'm probably going to have to cross a few of these off the list because my disposable time is through the floor right now. So a little bit about my own journey in podcasting. I started podcasting maybe 7 or 8 years ago, just as like a bit of an experiment. So my friends and I, we have an unhealthy obsession with self-help books. So as a bit of a joke, we started a podcast around self-help books called Help Self, where effectively we just, found books we love. We would read the book out, and we had this idea, where we thought if we read a book, we maybe took away 5% of that. But we thought, let's take away 100% and let's live the book out in extreme detail. And it was like a super fun show to do. It was a lot of work, but we just loved doing it. But we did that with no intention of anyone ever listening to it. Then as a bit of a joke on the show, we decided to start reaching out to the authors, and we would start to say stuff on the show like, we guarantee you next week the author's coming on the show. We promise you, and it was just because it was funny to us. And then we would send the emails, and all of a sudden authors started responding, and we started getting these huge authors on the show, and we were like, this was a joke. We didn't expect this. We better work out how to do interviewing, and we got to meet a bunch of our heroes, and it was amazing. And out of that, we got this opportunity to work with this coach called Matt Mashari, who's arguably one of the best exec coaches in the world. He works with Sam Altman and Naval, and the founders of Coinbase and Reddit and Discord, and some of the biggest companies in the world. And he agreed to coach us. I asked him to coach us, and he said no about 10 times. And we eventually said to him, "Are you a great coach, or do you coach great people?" And he loved that comment. And then we said, "Look, if you coach us, let's prove you're a great coach." And then we'll turn the whole thing into a podcast. And that podcast, it kind of went crazy. We topped the charts in Australia. It was listened to a bunch of times. It was great for my ego. And we saw, just what a successful podcast could look like. And that led me to see a bit of an opportunity here where there was a bit of a pattern on the way podcasts worked and what worked in the podcasting world. And so from there, I've started to just kind of create podcasts across every element of my life, or professional life at least, because I just see how easy they can be and just what kind of value you can get out of them. So now I work on shows. There's just a collection of them. I work on shows across all the different kinds of industries, which I help produce. We have millions of impressions. We've hit #1 on the charts. We've charted in 17 countries. We've won some some international podcasting awards as well, which is great. And we've been lucky enough to have lots and lots and lots of amazing guests, and nice fun sponsors on the shows as well. So I guess this is all I like and love talking about podcasts, because I really believe that everyone is going to have a podcast pretty soon, or at least smart people, right? Just right now, when you're hiring a graphic designer, you generally get to see a portfolio of work. The way the world's moving is that soon enough, exceptional people and leaders, their portfolio is going to be their podcast. So no matter what kind of executive role you're looking to go into, I think a podcast is going to be the boost there. And that is really because, as people have eroded trust with brands, they have increased trust with people. And so that human connection, human relationship can really shine through in the medium of podcasting. So today we're gonna run through why run a podcast at all, how to run a podcast, how to start a podcast, which is a few extra steps on top of running a podcast, and then just a few other notes that of thoughts that I have in this space. So why podcast? Podcasting is a whole lot of fun, but it is a medium that is continuing to grow. Everyone likes to think that podcasting is at a saturated point, but listenership is continuing to grow every single year, and the amount of podcasts is constantly exploding. And while it may feel like podcasting is saturated, podcasting can be an extremely niche tool. So you don't need to have millions and millions of listeners. There's been an explosion recently of really niche podcasts, and that's really the space where people are starting to look for content. So there's an ever-growing demand for new podcasts. The next thing is that Nick kind of like talked about this a little bit earlier, but everyone in the podcasting world just gives up, right? So only 5% of podcasts will make it to 20 episodes. So if you can just create a format of a podcast which has a low enough barrier to entry that you can keep on going, you will by design be more successful than nearly all of the podcasts in the world. So if you look on Spotify and look at podcasts, the chances are is that they're going to have one episode. So if you can just get through to 20, that's kind of like that precipice where you really start to get into a rhythm post that. So there is like an opportunity here for going for ease and just getting a rhythm here. Now, this is where I think the biggest misunderstanding in podcasting lies. When everyone thinks about doing a podcast, everyone often thinks about, I'm doing this to build a big audience. I want to have the Joe Rogans or the Hubermans, or there's these giant podcasts in the world that have massive audiences and you make money from that. That is like not the reason to do a podcast. If that is what you're intending to do, you are in for a very long 5+ year journey to really build out quality content and a big audience. It can happen faster than that. It can happen quickly, but the chances of building a big audience is very, very low. You need to have a very unique, value proposition, extremely good content, extremely good production value, and it has to happen over a long time. But I don't think you should do a podcast for that. I do all of my podcasts for the guests. So if you don't focus on the audience and you just assume you're going to have 0 listeners, you can actually still create a very strong network and real opportunity from day one. And the examples of that are, if you're trying to raise an investment round, you can meet any investor that you want using a podcast. If you're looking to get a job, you can get almost any job you want doing a podcast. If you're looking to run an executive coaching business, you can win any client you want with a podcast here. Now, the reason I think this is that guests are the hack, okay? So let's just forget about audience, and everything I talk about today is really going to be on the building guest relationships. So if you ask someone for a coffee, who's got more social capital than you, right? They're much more successful, or you're trying to sell them, or there's a reason that you want to get in a room with this person. The chance that they say yes to you is pretty low. If you ask them to come on a podcast, the chance that they come on your podcast and have a conversation with you is dramatically increased. So it's 2 or 3 times higher conversion rates to get those conversations. So first of all, you can use podcasting to get way more introductions and conversations with people. The second thing is that when you have a podcast with someone, it's a very, very present and intimate conversation. It's an interaction with someone that you won't conventionally have. You're not going to be in a room where someone's on the phone, or you're not going to be having a coffee where someone's distracted. You really truly are having a proper intimate conversation that fast forwards your relationship with them. Because it's also a podcast medium, you can get a lot deeper in a conversation. So you can go much further into a relationship with someone in one podcast than you can with 3 or 4 or 10, cursory interactions. And then the last thing is, every time you have a podcast with someone, you're creating content that you both share. So even if you're early in your business, or you're mature in your business, every time you post with Nick about this, you post with Google about this. Every person you have, you're posting on social media with this person, so that it's validating your brand alongside this person's. And then this person is posting about you too, which is increasing validation. So you get to have this one interaction where you get to ask them to come on the podcast, which is a special ego moment for them. They come on, you get this amazing interaction, and then you post about it afterwards. There's 3 or 4 ways you get to create value out of having this one, instead of a conversation with someone. So I do it for the guests. The way I think about it as well is, like, if I was building an executive coaching business, you get really dialed in on who your ideal customer profile, your ICP is. Then I would just hit up 50 or 100 people who would look like a good ICP, and then interview them 50 weeks in a row, or 2 a week, or 3 a week, right? Or if you're really ambitious, someone in the school was doing 10 a week, okay? You will convert from that. So for the podcast I work with, they have a conversion rate from anywhere from 30% as high as 80% of their guests become paid clients. Now, they're not always going to be that high, but when you get really dialed in about who you're interviewing, you can have amazing conversion in your business. So how do you actually run a podcast? These are all the different steps. You go from outreach, scheduling, recording, editing, hosting. You send thank yous and do social. So to go into a bit more detail, the first step is outreach. Like any business, this is a volume game. Reach out to as many people as possible. Now, for me, when they're cold connections, I find short LinkedIn connection requests are by far the best way to get in touch with someone. Just say goodbye to email. That will never work. If you're interested, I'm happy to share some of my templates, but short LinkedIn connection requests can have very high conversions, especially because you're asking them to come on a podcast, and everyone has an ego, especially if they're in business. They're going to love to come on your podcast. Longer emails are better when you've got warm intros, though, to give them a bit more context. When you're doing these outreach, I would recommend record your reach outs in a CRM. I use Notion, it's just super easy. Iterate your messages based on responses and keep a record of the messages you were using or the format of the messages so you can iterate and increase your conversion over time. So the software you need for this, I'm just going to talk about each step. What's the software that you need and is it free or how much does it cost? I just use LinkedIn. Sometimes I use Twitter, email, and Notion, and free tiers on all of those things. So there's nothing that you need there. Outreach is the main game here. I would say when you were doing this, I feel very strongly, do not use a VA for this. If you use a VA, you will alienate your audience and you will not get guests coming on your show, or you will get them canceling on your show. The outreach and scheduling has to be managed by you, or you have a significant drop off. So then schedule. This sounds really simple, right? As soon as someone responds to you, capitalize on that moment and book it in the calendar straight away. It is as simple as it sounds, but when you capitalize quickly, you will get a much higher proportion or percentage of guests actually booked in your calendar and more conversations happening. Then, just as normal with any kind of meeting, send out reminders a week before and a day before, and you'll have much more people actually rocking up to your meeting. But the good thing is about a podcast, people don't bail on these very often. Over the hundreds I've recorded, I've only ever had a handful of people cancel, even without the reminders. People want to be on a podcast. Now, just a quick tip here. I use, to record, we'll go on to it, I use a separate recording platform. But just whatever your normal video room is when you have video calls with someone, use that, okay? Normal calendar invite, normal video room, and just meet someone in the Zoom. That should be your initial point of call, or meet someone in the Google Meets. Because if you, again, you want to lower, you're always looking to lower the barrier to entry. So if you have something like straight into Riverside, which is the platform we use, people can get confused and it actually can frustrate the experience for people. And as always, track the progress in your CRM, keep pushing people through so you know where you're at, you don't drop anything here. So tools, all the same. Now you've got calendar added. Then actually recording. Make sure you're well prepared for the guest. Now you shouldn't have to do a lot of preparation. I think half an hour of preparation is totally fine, depending on the format you go with. But make sure you write a very flattering, killer intro for the guests that you're going to have on the show. You want to make them feel good. You want to make them feel like they're a hero. So when they come on, write down what is really cool about them. Why is it interesting that they're coming on your show? And have them actually, when you're reading that introduction for them, they're going to feel awesome. When you're in the recording meeting, spend the first 10 to 15 minutes warming up the guest. So have some banter, have a good conversation, make them feel comfortable. If you don't do this and you jump straight into a recording, people do get really clammed up and they get very fearful, and then they start to, that kind of like steamrolls into the call. You want to make sure they feel good before you start recording. As soon as you get in the recording studio, press record. And that's because on all recording studios, if you press record, it often comes up with a countdown saying you're live recording 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That can also freak people out a little bit. Just get that out of the way, have a conversation, wait 10 or 15, then get into the conversation. At the end of your recording, you've got another 10 or 15 minutes of just like banter, catch up. I always ask for feedback. If you ask someone for feedback at the end of a call, people will generally immediately trust you a whole lot more because they're like, well, this person's very interested, they're very introspective, they're coachable, like they're open to stuff. So asking for feedback always generally makes people then start to ask you questions about your business as well. So when you're writing a script, you will talk about your business in the show, which I'll get into a little bit later, but asking for feedback is a really good tip. And then whenever possible, you should do this in every meeting ever, but take a chance to book in another conversation. So Meet or Zoom, use whatever subscriptions you have there. You can use the free tiers, but then use Riverside as your recording tool. So Riverside is a separate software which you should use to specifically record your podcast. It's about $15 a month for the lowest tier. Also, Riverside can be really useful when you're creating other assets as well, because you can do some of the editing in there too. Now, when you're recording, you've got to consider 3 kind of major pillars, right? Video, audio, and lighting. Now, you can do this as easy as you want or as complex as you want, as cheap as you want or as expensive as you want. There is no limit to how much money you can spend on this stuff, but you can start in a very affordable manner. So if you want, I recommend doing video. I think video is really important, but you can do video very simply or in a very simple manner. The first thing, if you want a basic setup, the single biggest hack is to just use your phone. Your phone is an incredible camera. Just set it up on a tripod behind your desk. One good hack is don't sit it on your desk, because when you touch your desk, it will shake around and your video footage will be shaky. Sit it on a tripod behind your desk and you'll get a very good quality shot. If you want a more advanced setup, you can use something like a Sony ZV-E10. They're about $700. You can even get them secondhand. That's a great camera. That's what I'm using right now. It is studio quality camera. Then you've got to kind of consider the room around you. You can set something up. You can have cool lighting behind you or a couch or whatever. Or the easiest thing you can do is to just get a green screen. A green screen can make you look very professional. If you have a proper green screen and just lay a background on it, you can get them for $50 off Amazon. That's what I did for my first 100 episodes, and the podcast looked great. Audio. Bad audio is bad. There's no way around that. I think like never ever use the microphone in your computer, but you can get expensive or cheap mics. You can go as expensive as this one. This was about $1,000 for the whole setup. That is not really necessary. But you can get mics from JB Hi-Fi or, just stores nearby for $50, right? A $50 mic is going to be significantly better. Just a little bit of research online to find the best one for you. And for the easiest hack, if you just want to get something out, AirPods have pretty good audio. Or an even better audio is if you have those old like corded earbuds that Apple used to have that came with the iPhone. They have surprisingly good audio too. I love those. They're a really good hack. Then lighting. Nice lighting will make a world of difference and will immediately elevate you above most creators just by having good lighting. So 3 setups I recommend. First one is basic setup. Just get a decent ring light, $100, sit it right in front of you. And that is like, just with that and your phone camera, your setup is going to be pretty damn good. About $100. If you want a more like affordable setup, but maybe take it to the next level, I'd recommend a soft box light. Soft box lights are really great. They get this great kind of white wash over you and it lights you up in a really nice way. Have that sitting right in front of you, and then have a second LED light panel just off to a 45-degree angle, and have that on kind of like a golden or orangey, yellowy kind of light. That will give you nice shadowing. It'll make you look really good. It looks borderline like a studio. Get a softbox for $80, get an LED for $80 for $60. Pretty cheap on Amazon. If you want a proper studio style setup on lighting, it can cost you about $500, or you can get them more cheaper secondhand. I recommend Elgato. They're great studio lights. I go for a 3-point system. You have 2 45-degree lights in front of you and 1 45-degree light behind you, which is what I've got. And I think this lighting looks great. And you can mess around with it to get the right shadows on you. That's the setup I would recommend. If you guys want these slides, just send me a message after and I can send this through to you as well. So now you've got it recorded. You've got this great bit of content there. You want to edit it. Editing is the worst part of doing a podcast. The fun part is the conversation and the reach out. The worst part is editing. So you just need to get it done. The first time you do this, it will be long and it will be challenging if you do it yourself. I recommend, if you can, get a cheap editor. I use really low cost editors myself, and I'm happy to connect you to the people I use for that, or all the people I use the same kind of editing system, and it's much more affordable. But if you want to do it yourself, you definitely can. What you want to use is you want to use Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is the best video editing software, and then you want to use an add-on that you can buy called Autopod. Autopod uses AI to do a bunch of the heavy lifting and the editing for you. If you use those 2 tools, it's about $60, $70 a month. That will take most of the heavy lifting of the editing for you. Then use Riverside to get the shape of your social clips. So on Riverside, which you recorded in, you can just press create me social clips, and it will dump out immediately about 10 options for you, saying, hey, these were 10 pretty good 30 to 60-second clips that you can use on your social media. That makes it a whole lot easier for you. And again, you're already paying for Riverside from the previous tab, which is $15 a month. Then I use Motion Array. Motion Array is where you can get all of your digital assets, all the music you need, all the animations you need, all the kind of like name tag, graphics. It's a really great platform. I absolutely love Motion Array. It's about $30 a month as well. They're all the tools you need for editing. I'm not going to teach you how to edit here, but there's a ton of videos out there on how to edit. But editing is the hard part. If you can hand that off, I would recommend it. Hosting. You've done the hard work. Now you want to get it onto all the platforms. Create once, use multiple times, okay? Podcasting gives you such a great, rich resource to use. So once you've got that, you want to create an episode thumbnail in Canva and then write an episode description with ChatGPT. Thumbnail should always be similar for ease, because you want, again, we're always going for limiting your barrier to entry. But also, when you use the same style of thumbnail every time, you increase your recognizability in your brand. Descriptions should include show descriptions, like in descriptions of your show and all of your links for SEO. But ChatGPT, I created a custom GPT. I put a thumbnail, I mean, I put a transcript in there from Riverside, and it just gives me all of that content for me. Upload every video to YouTube and all of your audio to Buzzsprout or directly through Spotify, and that will get onto all of the platforms for you. You know, Spotify podcasting, Apple podcasting, Castbox, Pocket Cast, all of that kind of stuff. Then your shorts, upload and schedule those shorts to YouTube or to, you know, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything. Okay. You want to put that out on as many platforms as you can. Then more recently as well, you can take I've been taking my transcripts and turning my podcast into articles as well. So again, you want to recreate as many assets as possible and get all of that going out into the world. So YouTube is free, Buzzsprout is $12 a month, or if you do directly through Spotify, it's free. And then I recommend paying for Canva, which is $20 a month. If you just don't have Canva, you just get Canva. Canva is the absolute best. You can create stuff so easily on Canva. Now, this is a really important one, and people kind of miss this. Say thank you to your guest once you've recorded, okay? Especially when you're about to host the episode, say thank you so much for coming on. Like, mate, this was so much fun. And send a bit of a heartfelt message, and give them links, right? Give them links to their episode, give them links to all of the content you created with them, and give them access to that content, because they might want to post it themselves, they might want to cut it up themselves. By creating real value to them, you know, you're increasing your relationship with this person. As a bonus, I love doing this. Write your thank you message by hand and then send a photo of that to them. That will definitely stand out for them in a huge way. And so I always get huge feedback when I do that. Lastly, socials. You know, I can't impress this message enough. You've done the hard work. Now put it on the socials, every social you can. But wherever your audience lies, if you're in exec coaching, they're very, very, very likely on LinkedIn. You should be posting on LinkedIn about this once or twice a week. You know, for every podcast episode you do, if you want, you can schedule all of this months in advance. I like to record in one day, and then, you know, months in advance for all of the episodes that I've done. Guys, okay? You've got to do all of that for every single episode, but then you've got a little bit at the beginning and in the end when you want to start a podcast. Most important thing, again, we are focusing on creating a podcast for the guest experience, the audience. So you want to work out who your absolute ideal guest is, either someone you're trying to sell or someone you're trying to meet. Business too. Then you've got to work out your format. Okay. Now, I think about format in two different options. Format option one, super low effort, super low prep time. That's what I go for. If you guys are starting about doing a podcast, I heard someone just say they've just done their first podcast, their first few podcasts. Podcasting gets old real fast. The novelty wears off super quickly, and then it becomes a grind. So you want to make sure you haven't committed to an extremely complex setup and a complex prep time, because it becomes much harder to maintain once the funds worn off and it feels like a job. So I go for super low effort, repetitive interview style podcast. Same 5 questions every single time. I have a bank of 10 or 15 other questions if the conversation goes in a different way. And as you become a better host, you can go off script a little bit more, but have that same structure, right? I introduce the guest, I introduce me, I have the same 5 questions, I close the podcast out. That's easy. Then you can do all your prep in half an hour. Format option 2, best for audience growth, and it's better content. You can create a high effort format. So something like the self-help podcast that I mentioned earlier, we read a book, then we lived it out for an entire month. That is a lot of work, but it was super interesting content, right? And we got a good audience because of that. But that was so much work over a long amount of time. probably like 50 plus hours a month to get an episode out. And we're doing 1 hour a month. And that was two different people doing it. Whereas my current podcast, half an hour of prep, 1 hour of recording, and then all the editing and stuff like that. So I go for format option number one. Over time, if you get good at it and you have the interest to keep doing lots of effort, then make your podcast more complicated over time. Scripts, write your scripts. So come up with a show name and a show description. You can iterate this later, but you want to come up with something. Never call it like if my business was called, Joel Trapani Exec Coaching, I wouldn't call it that. I would call it like the Exec Coaching Podcast by Joel Trapani Exec Coaching, right? You want to put your brand as secondary. You want to put the podcast as first. If you put your branding too strong in this, it looks salesy. You want this to look like you're creating genuine content, which you are, right? You are adding value to this person. Every time someone comes on your show, they get great content, they feel good, and they get to post about it as an expert in the industry. You're adding value to them. So make it the podcast its own thing, and your brand of your business should be secondary in that. So you've got write scripts for the podcast intro, introducing the show itself. You need to write scripts for how you introduce your guests. You need to write scripts on how you introduce yourself. That's important. Then if you have different segments, like what's the news this month, or, these are, bullshit in the area this month. You want to write little introductions for the segments. You want to have a plugs section at the end. So if someone has something, you want to always, it's really important to give someone a section at the end of the podcast to tell them that they can do plugs there. Because if someone's coming to show, they want to sell something themselves, right? They've just written a book, they want to talk about that. If you don't give them permission that at the end, they're going to get a chance to talk about whatever they want, they're going to try and shove it into every question you have. And it can make for a really awkward conversation sometimes. So giving them the space there, plugs at the end, also valuable for them, right? And then a sign off. I would say the guest intro is really key. Your host intro should be structured in a pretty strategic way. At the end of the day, this is a time where you're actually getting permission because of the format to talk about your business. So this is secondary. We've talked about the show, we've talked about them. We say, and now I just need to add credibility to myself. It's my audience. I'm just talking again about who I am. So put a few hooks in there that make you seem really interesting and tease your business a little bit. Because 9 times out of 10, the guest will ask you more about it at the end. So you don't want to make it full salesy, but you want to put a few hooks in there so they ask you about it towards the end. Then a good hack here is create a document that you use for recording every episode. So you have this week's episode with, Nick, then next week you want to copy and paste it and copy and paste it and copy and paste it, because you want to use that introduction and those assets that you've created for each prep. When you actually host your podcast later, you'll have all the names and links and everything ready to go for when you're hosting. So it just makes it easier for you later on. Branding. Decide on a color scheme you love. You're going to use this a lot. So, if you like greens or blues or purples or whatever, or your business is blues, use a similar thing to kind of carry through. Then use Canva to create a logo, your podcast artwork, and your YouTube banner image. They're going to be the 3 main things you need. I just use templates. Canva has such amazing templates, right? Like you can create very, very professional looking stuff just from there. And at least it's a starting point. If you want to get a proper graphic designer later, you can, but that's where I would start. Then use Motion Array to search for intro music you like and graphic animations you like. There's like cool animations at the start of shows or TV shows or whatever. There's a lot of that on Motion Array that you can just use and copy and paste at the beginning of your videos, of your podcast. With music and branding and colors, it's got to match roughly the show, right? If you're interviewing like higher education professionals, you probably don't want like punk music, and graffiti looking artwork. My personal podcast, I've got like punk music and, graffiti looking stuff. But my professional podcast for my work, I don't have that. I have more, prim and proper and, like elevator-y style music. Like it's got to suit the brand of the show of the people. Okay. It's got to all kind of like come together. And sometimes you might need to iterate to get there. Then your first guest, someone did say they just posted their first episode. I'm guessing you were shitting yourself when you recorded your first episode. I absolutely was. I don't know why I was so scared, but like it wasn't even a live environment, but it's terrifying when you record your first episode. Like, they're very scary moments. It feels like a lot of pressure. You've got a script that you're sticking so hard to it. You're going to be nervous and you're going to want to do a lot of retakes. All right. So because you're going to want to probably say your intro like 3 times because you just keep stumbling over your own words, or you're going to keep getting caught up when you're talking to someone about different things, You want someone that makes you feel comfortable. So get your friends on here. They don't have to be your ideal ICP. Again, no one's listening to these episodes, especially the first few episodes, right? So just get people that you feel comfortable with to record. Probably your first 4 or 5 episodes where you feel free and feel comfortable to make mistakes and to redo stuff. Once you get a bit more comfortable, and you've done this process a few times, that's when I'll start to go out to more people. If you're like me though, I like to be held accountable to stuff. Like that's how I get moving really fast. So for my most recent podcast, I just booked in a guest for the next week. And I was like, shit, I better like get everything ready, better write my scripts, better get my branding, all that kind of stuff. And that really made me move. Right. So just getting moving is more important than anything else. And, I can't remember who said it this, but they said that it's their first podcast and they're going to get better over time. That's absolutely true. You will get so much better here. And just getting started is the most important thing. You can change and you can iterate, right? And that's the last point here. You want to iterate this over time. Like change who your guests are, change what your music is, change what your scripts are. Over time, learn and learn and learn and update as you need to go. You will get much more confident and you'll get more of a flow for it and more of a feel for it. But doing a podcast, it can just be so, so valuable for you. And I just can't recommend doing it highly enough. So that's how you start it. Then, kind of just everything else, the other kind of notes I like to run through that just come to mind is growth. Use big names to get big names, right? So if you get a big guest on there, then when I do my reach out message, I've had other guests like Nick Cree, right? Like start to use the names that can as a leverage for getting other big names or other familiar names to them. Or if you top the charts for some reason, or you get an international podcasting award, use all of those things to get the bigger guests, and then use those guests to get the bigger guests. Cadence for the best brand and audience building, you need consistency. So I always recommend weekly. Committing to more than weekly is probably just a bad idea to begin with. You probably can't handle it. So commit to weekly, and then if you get extra energy, do a couple extra. But I would prefer to bank them up for later when it gets harder. And then once you've proven out you've got the engine, then do it more. Personal branding, I just think podcasts are the ultimate way to build your own personal brand. And whether you are trying to raise an investment round, trying to sell a customer, or build a business, your personal brand is what's going to get the cut through. So having this on all the socials, I think is so important to boost your own profile. Bank episodes. Nick can't do this. I don't know why Nick does this live every week. That seems like that's so crazy to me. But you're going to get busy. The novelty of running a podcast is going to wear off and it's going to become a chore. So I personally record once a month. I record 7 or 8 episodes. As many as I can on that one day, and then I use them over the next month. And that means I can occasionally miss months as well if I just don't get anything booked in or I'm busy. So you want to bank up and host as far in advance as you can. Who should do a podcast? Like I genuinely think podcasts can be used for nearly everything. If I was looking to get a job and I was like, I really want to get a job at a high profile company in an industry I don't work in, I would use a podcast and I'd call it like getting into AI. And then I would just interview 20 to 50 people about getting into AI. And I'd interview the people that would hire me at the company, right? Then I'm immediately talking to 50 hiring managers or their bosses that are going to push me down. So, or if I'm looking to sell exec coaching clients, I would look at all the Series A companies that have just raised money that are probably in a good position, interview 50 of them. You can just use it for anything, to sell, to get a job, or to become a thought leader, right? I mainly do mine to just meet interesting people. Like I have a work one, which is more of like, a sales tool, but then I got a personal one that you get to meet very interesting people and actually stretch your understanding of stuff, which I love it as well. And then just, outsource if you can, wherever you can, you should be outsourcing this. Except for guest management, because people get pretty offended and never do this. Never send someone a link and say, book in here. You will just churn all of the hard work you've just done and almost no one will book in with you. You need to make sure they're feeling that's the thing, right? You're trying to make a guest feel special. And if you palm them off to an EA or you palm them off to a link, they don't feel special. And even if you have the recording there, you've broken down that trust layer there. But everything else, editing, hosting, thumbnails, descriptions, repurposing of content, all of that shit, right? Get editors and VAs to help with that kind of stuff. Build into your workflow. You should just be doing reach out, thank yous, and recording, right? That's the best use of your time. It's the most fun time and super high leverage. And that's everything. I love talking about this stuff. If you guys think about doing a podcast, you're early in it, hit me up. Happy to kind of like, help if I can in any way. If you guys are looking for cheap editors, let me know. Happy to kind of connect you to the people I use. Um, yeah. And yeah, check out my podcast. It's called Do As I Say. I love doing it. And yeah, add me on LinkedIn and would love to disconnect. And that's everything I got.
Fabulous. Excellent. Thanks, Joel. So let's open up the floor for any questions that you may have. I do have one question though, Joel, and that is, I have come across podcast formats where they charge the guests to come onto the podcast.
No, never fucking do that. I hate that. Like it's just such a dumb model, right? Like, you're trying to do this to build a relationship with someone. If you're asking a podcast to come on, like a guest to come on and pay you, like what value are you creating for them? At that point, you're changing the whole equation where you need to provide a crazy amount of value. So you could only do that if you have like hundreds of thousands of downloads to make it really valuable. But even at that point, I would still never use it for that. Like, I just don't think the trade-off you're doing is such a bad trade-off there for what maybe $100 an episode. Your time is worth more than $100 an hour anyway, okay? Like, you get a way better outcome if you just ended up getting them as a client down the track. I did not like that model.
I didn't like it either. It's not what I'm going to do, but it was a model that's out there that I've seen
Yeah.
sort of commercially. Yeah. All right.
Maybe Nick's trying to secretly charge me for being here today.
Well, I know that you can afford it because they're charging you more for that pendant.
Yeah, true.
All
Kel, do
right.
you have a question?
Yeah, as far as like when we talk about monetizing, as far as doing things like seeking sponsorships for shows or groups of shows or have you had any experience with that? What's your thoughts around that stuff?
Yeah, so if like there's three different ways to monetize in my mind. If you want to monetize through like ad reads, you generally need to have about 10,000 downloads per episode, which is very hard to get. So 10,000 downloads per episode is a pretty tough spot to be at. And like you're probably not going to get there for a while. So I wouldn't do a podcast if that was what I wanted to get. If I wanted to monetize the podcast, I wouldn't do a podcast like for that kind of monetization. You can get monetization of a podcast from ad reads if you find really niche audiences. So like you might not need 10,000 if you just have like the top 50 CMOs in the country and you could maybe monetize them. But like that's also kind of like somewhat that's a very rare outcome, I would say. The way to really monetize, right, is to convert guests into clients in your business. So if you're doing exec coaching, if you build the right relationship with a guest, they're gonna be like, hey, you talked to Kel, you talked about, exec coaching, like who's that good for? And like then you build that relationship. And then if they convert to, your $1,000 a month or $10,000 a year, whatever your thing is, like that's the monetization. That's the only model I would go for, is to use it as a sales tool.
Yeah, no, look, that's the model I use. I actually do it a little bit differently. I look at it building relationship for the point of a JV rather than an individual client. So
That's perfect, right? That's a really good reason. You don't need to directly sell that person, but like the monetization of value creation for you needs to be through the guest.
Yeah, perfect.
And not charging them.
Yeah.
Right? Oh yeah, you guys just put a link in there. I created a game. I created this game for founders and business people. I wouldn't do this now since I got to have a kid, but like I just had tons of free time, so I used AI to like create all the artwork and just created this game from scratch. So would love any feedback you have on it. It's called Pitch Please. Essentially, you get a stack of product cards and a stack of customer cards, and the idea is that everyone plays two cards, and it's one customer and one product in a match. You've got to pitch a business for that. So bowling balls for surfers, or invisibility cloaks for dentists, and it's fun combos, and it's been super fun for all the people that have bought so far. I just love doing it as an experiment. So if anyone knows buyers that work at City Beach and Universal, I really want to speak to buyers. So that's actually an ask I would have. I'd love to speak to buyers. I don't really want to do a B2C marketing campaign here. I'd rather do enterprise sales. Sorry, I just took over again. Any other questions?
Great opportunity here. If you have a podcast, maybe some questions about how you or what you could do. I can see David's just taken his microphone mute.
Well, yeah, look, I have to say that we use Riverside and obviously looked at a whole lot of different ones, but they are, we'll just say, easier to use instead of trying to use a whole lot of, and even in the editing side. And like you say, you do have to invest into something. So they take you through the journey. But I have to say that the very first one, by the time I set it up through Riverside onto Spotify and then onto Apple Podcasts and all the rest of it, that was kind of like 4 days of brain staking activity. So now literally I can load all that stuff up in about, well, once it's edited, it takes about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So
the first one is hard.
The setup side is takes time, because obviously you have to subscribe to those things or whatever. You have to set them all up, because Spotify Creator, as they call it. But yeah, there's a whole lot of other different ones. But I think the hardest part is you going through and analyzing them all and going through all of that process, that you just have to get out of the analyzing mode and just do it, isn't it, Joel?
100%.
And you have to, like, my wife and I are doing it as like co-hosts. So the first one was more of an introduction. The next one we had a guest, so we had to go through that process of connecting them up, which was relatively easy. But we didn't structure enough of it. So they talked a lot, and then once we sent it to them before we actually published it, they go, "Oh, I talked too much," and whatever. I said, "Look, that's fine." So that's all part, but they were excited. They were so excited just to be on a podcast. And even when you say to someone, "Oh, I've got a podcast, you want to come on?" It's quite amazing how people, yes, I'd love to. Like, no one's saying, "I don't know."
People love being on podcasts. But David, I would never send my podcast to someone for review, because it creates another barrier to entry for me. And if someone says, like, can I review this? I just say no. Because I want to make it as easy for me as possible. So I'm just removing a step.
Yep. Okay. So you just publish it and then
But
send
it's up
them
to you,
the
right?
link.
Everyone can do it their own way.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yep. Yep. Because really, what do they know about what they
It's your
gain? I suppose.
podcast.
Yep. It's exactly. Yeah. 100%. Yep. Yep. So that you just virtually just share that with them and that type of thing. Yep. No, fair. Thanks for that. Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm interested to know.
And I guess, like,
I was just going to say,
mate.
who here's got a podcast? Yeah, just drop into chat who here currently is podcasting, just so we get a read of the room as to who is. And maybe just pop a P into chat if you are. If you're thinking about a podcast, let's put T in chat just to see who's here. A bit of a poll. Sorry, John.
I was just going to say that the first part of setting up a podcast is hard. So it's not hard, it's long and arduous because you have to figure it out. But once you do it, it's very easy. And like I call it like a podcast production company where I just help people get their podcast set up. All it costs, right? Because it just costs a lot of money to get the graphic designs and editing and all that kind of stuff done. So if anyone is looking to get a podcast off the ground, happy to kind of help anyone get that off the ground with just set up. Or if you just want to also hand off your podcasting to someone else, we just manage some of people's podcasts for them, right? So they just come to us, it goes through our editors, and it just goes live for them. So once you record, you flick us a recording link and everything else is looked after. So if you want to go down that path, like there's definitely like hit me up. But also if you just want to, I'm also happy to kind of like get on a call with anyone and just tell you guys, my advice on how to do stuff. I'm obviously pretty opinionated, as you can tell from this call, and pretty passionate about the space.
Yeah, just another question, Joel. In terms of topic for podcast, how related does it need to be to your business, or could you have something that is quite unrelated to your business and it'll still work?
No, it has to be related. It has to be related to the people. So if I was doing one, it would be about the people I'm celebrating, right? So if I was creating like a business in AI, for example, I would be like leaders in AI, and then I would interview people who are leaders in AI and I'd ask them about their journey in AI. So it has to have a thread. If yours is like you're doing an exec coaching business and then you're saying, here's my podcasting about, learning guitar, then like it's people won't come on. It has to be linked. Like if you want to do a personal podcast about different beer you've tried, by all means do that. Right? That's fun for you. But that's not the thing. That's not the tool. You can take elements of personality into it and you can say, hey, we're going to do a podcast and every time we record, we're going to have beers, but it's about AI, right? That you need to have a strong link. You can have two podcasts. You can definitely have two podcasts. I'm saying they have to be separate though. Like you can have your personal podcast, but you can't have, like someone said, what do you mean I can't have a podcast on sales and mindset as well as a separate one on van life? You can, but you can't get a sales leader to then come and talk about van life because they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Unless you record yours in your van, okay, but it's always about sales and leadership mindset. So I know Julie's joking, but that's a good example for me. Like there definitely needs to be a link here.
Excellent. Any other questions from anyone at all?
Julie has the most amazing book collection behind her. She's got her books organized by color. I've never seen that before, but geez, do you only buy books that suit those colors? They just don't get to go on display, I guess. They're at the back.
No, I color coordinated that library, and I've got another huge library out there that's all color coordinated as well. And yes, my podcast will be. And yes, my podcast will be recorded from my van when I finish building it.
But I reckon a van might actually have pretty good acoustics.
Should do.
So it's not a bad idea. Yeah.
Oh, you're early enough in the process, Julie, to make sure you've got all of the acoustic through the van.
Well, if you follow my Facebook page on Adventureful Life, you'll see I've already started sound deadening and lining it, so it should be right.
Oh, I love that.
Actually, Julie has got the most incredible book collection. You're quite right. Every session that I'm on with her on Tuesday, I'm on a mastermind session with her. She pulls out a collection of different books that are highly related. So probably a podcast and all the books that you've read.
Probably could.
All right. Any other questions anyone has about possibilities, your podcast, anything you want to learn? Got a few minutes left if anyone's got a question. I know Shane's got a podcast. Tell us about, you must have either some wisdom or a question.
Here I was thinking I was going to sneak under the radar, Nick.
I'm watching you.
Actually, I've been sitting here thinking I will catch up with Joel through LinkedIn for a couple of different reasons. Yes, I've produced 3 different podcasts over the years. One was called Talking Toowoomba, which was obviously based around things that were happening in and around the city of Toowoomba, where I live here in Queensland. And another one was, which I'm sure Julie's going to like to have a listen to, and that is, it was called Adventures on the Road. And it was based around caravanning and camping and travelling around Australia. Those podcasts are currently, they're still up and live, of course, as you may or may not know, and Joel didn't get a chance to mention, is that podcast is evergreen. Once you start it and you've put it up there, it's there for life. You can die and pass on, but they'll still be there for people to listen to. But I suppose if you wanted me to share a piece of wisdom, it probably is this, that you don't realise the power your voice has and the power that you have by having a podcast. And look, this was proved to me, and why I'm so passionate about podcasting. I'm a bit like Joel. I'm all about helping people with their podcasts. And that is that I went in to buy a pair of shoes one day here in Toowoomba, and this nice young girl was helping me, try on different shoes and that, and we got talking, and I mentioned that years ago when I was a little bit younger, I'd worked in a shoe store as well. So we had an engaging conversation. And by the time we chatted and done everything, we got up to the counter and we're organising the sale of the shoes. She said to me, gosh, you've got a lovely voice. And I thought, geez, she doesn't know me very well, because I don't think my voice is that good, but obviously it is. And I said, what, you mean I've got a face for radio? She said, no. She said, I actually, there's something about your voice that I like. She said, you should be a radio announcer. And I said, well, it's funny you should say that. I said, I've actually got a podcast. And what came out of her mouth next rocked me. She said, my God, you're Shane, the host of the Talking to Woomba podcast. I listen to your podcast all the time. Now, you don't see my face. My face is not put out there with the podcast, but she picked it purely from my voice. And it's that strength of engagement with your voice that is so valuable for people. And I think anybody who's in business should look at creating a podcast, because it just gives them enormous power to be in contact in a very personal way with their current clients and their future clients. And yeah.
Fabulous. Oh, that's an excellent story there. It's always good to get that recognition, but amazing that they've never seen you, but they recognise the voice. So yeah, you're quite right. All right, got a question in chat there from Dennis. Oh, actually, you've answered it, I think, have you, Joel?
Yeah, Dennis just asked, when launching, how many episodes should you have banked? I said, it just depends on your appetite for fear. I love being truly accountable, so I would prefer to begin with any of my projects, I'd rather just get something out way rather than have a perfect process, because that makes me just get it done, because then I'm truly accountable when something's out in the world. But if you want to be truly organized, I'd recommend 3, just to have a bit of a bank there. But you could record your first 3 on the same day. That's totally fine as well. But yeah, I would probably opt for just going out, just going out live, just getting out in the world and dealing with the consequences and making it work after that.
Fabulous, excellent. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. So what I'd like is, what's your biggest learning? Just drop into chat. What was the one thing that you learned, your takeaway, the aha moment, the thing there that really sparked a interest or lit you up from tonight's session? I know for me, having been on air for about 8 years now, there are still things to learn. And, from tonight, I've got a whole notebook here of takeaways for tonight. So really appreciate your time tonight, Joel, and sharing your experience on here as well too. So some excellent takeaways. And I think I saw a whole lot of tops of heads. And so seeing tops of heads means that you're writing stuff down. So you must have been engaged and interested if I could see the top of your head. Am I right?
Or it's interesting scrolling, right?
100%, yeah. All right, what have we got here? Thanks. Excellent. All right, well, once again, thanks, Joel, for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. For those that do want to connect with Joel, his links, like his LinkedIn link, his Linktree link, they are in the chat. So there's a good, and it's back in chat again now. If you want to watch this show again, it will be up on the Smash Go YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. You know anyone else that would be interested in this, or you know someone that's been saying, hey, look, I'd love to do a podcast or really thinking about it, send them to the Smash Go channel. It's there, or send them through to Joel to connect with him directly as well too. Next week, we have, who have we got next week? We've got Sarah Cordner coming next week. So those of you that are looking to create courses or programs, she is an absolute legend when it comes to that. She's very engaging. She is very energized as well too. She's here to talk about how you can monetize your knowledge by putting together good courses and good programs. So that's her qualification. She is someone that is a course designer, and she's got a very large community as well. She lives on the Gold Coast, but got a very big community globally. So definitely worth coming along to check her out as well too. Now's a great time to save the chat with all of those links in chat. If you're not sure how to do that, it is the 3 little dots on the top right-hand side of chat. If you click on it, it'll give you the option to save. Click save, and then immediately click the link that it gives you. Then it'll open it up on your computer, so you don't have to hunt to see where it's actually saved it. Fabulous. All right, well, look, thanks everyone for coming on tonight. I trust you got a heap of value out of it. I look forward to listening to some of the podcasts that have come out from tonight's session. There's a few podcasts that I get to check out and listen to as well too. Sort of looking at David Fisher, Dennis Giannitsis, who I already know is podcasting, Kel, who have been on your podcast, and I'm looking forward to Julie Mason's podcast and van life as well too. And Shane, definitely one to revisit for yours as well too. So if you want me to listen to your podcast or you want to share it out as well too, feel free to flick me through a link. And who knows, might even feature it on the show as well too. But once again, thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks, Joel, and look forward to seeing you all again next week. Have a good night.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast. You can also find me on social media and online. Just search for Business Owners Smashing It Online and Nick Cree, spelled Nickcree, all one word. If you like this and want to hear more, subscribe now. Until next time, don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you.